Hello, fair listener. Welcome back to another episode of Active Breath, the MVM Miller Voice Method podcast. My name is Kyle Cameron. I am one of your hosts, and I am here with my fellow co-host, whose name is
Scott Miller.
Scott Miller, how are you doing today?
You can't ask me that question. I'll take up 5 minutes.
I mustn't.
That
What if I put a timer down for 60 seconds? We'll get there. I've been thinking that maybe we should institute the check-ins on the podcast.
That's
so maybe
right.
I'm just going to drop that idea right here, and then we can have some producer meetings about that.
I
think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I am currently in the throes of finishing up the manuscript for the text transfusion.
Ooh, tease it.
Book. This book on embodied memorization, creating a new way of memorizing. I hasten to say new way because there's really, for actors at least, there's no established way of memorizing besides kind of hodgepodge approaches. So this attempts to systematize embodied memorization. And I say embodied because right from the beginning, we know a lot more about the memory now than we used to, even 20, 30 years ago, and how thought works in the brain, et cetera. So it's incorporating all those, all that research and new knowledge into something I've been researching and working on with many co-collaborators and co-researchers for the past 10 to 15 years. So finally...
And dozens of students as lab rats over the years.
At least more than dozens, right?
Hundreds.
So, yeah. So
thousands.
So I'm dealing with the deadline and trying to get that done for the first published book. So it's very exciting. It's a
we can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
And I can say, as a person who has used the technique, it works. So if you, fair listener, get a chance to check out text transfusion, I encourage you to approach it. I think it's a really intriguing method. And like you said, as actors, our number one job is to remember our lines. And that's the one thing that nobody teaches. I guess I shouldn't say nobody. That's probably, hyperbole is rarely accurate. But I don't think I was ever taught how to memorize. I think that's just something we kind of stumble into and find our own way.
Yeah, there's a bit of a disclaimer because the publishers probably won't be so happy about the title text transfusion because when they first heard it, they were like, it sounds surgical. So it may be called, it may be called something else, but it'll certainly be about embodied memorization from Miller Voice Method sphere. So,
well, stay tuned. Stay tuned for more. It is time for me to bring on someone who has been present at all of our podcast recordings so far, but I don't believe that we have heard her voice. We have our podcast sort of inceptor and also producer, and she is our fair guest today. She is a podcaster in her own right, and we will hear more and more about that. Folks, may I introduce Rosalynde Kasper.
Hi, everyone. Hello.
Welcome.
It's good to talk.
Yeah.
While listening to you two talk. This is a novel experience for me.
Yeah, you've been here every time. Every time we record, I wonder if there's going to be something in the episode where Roz cuts in and, either corrects us or tells us to do something different. But so far, I think this is your first actual appearance.
There have been countless moments where I want to jump in because the conversation is interesting or exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes all of my self-restraint to not bring myself into the show.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
And that self-restraint has expired.
Sorry, say that again?
I said, and that self-restraint has expired. Yes. So here I am today.
You've been released. The shackles are off. Tell us about yourself. What do you bring to this podcasting world today?
Quite literally the podcasting part of it.
Yes.
I am the host of Horror, or I guess I should say I'm the host of Horror Vanguard, or at least one of them, along with my co-ghost John. We've been going for almost 8 years strong now, talking about a culture of horror and our position in the horror of cultures. So I think it's been interesting, it's been exciting, it's been really rewarding, it's been a weird experience. And despite, I guess, maybe I would describe it as semi-professionally talking for a living for nearly a decade, I have only been seriously working on the instrument, working on the voice for maybe the last year and a half.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you been podcasting? How long has your show been running?
20. Oh my God, listeners, please correct me. 2017.
Oh my
think.
God. I thought you were going to say 20x years. That's what I thought you were going to tell me. And I was like, how can that possibly be?
Yeah, we first released our initial episode on a wax cylinder that was distributed by carrier pigeon.
Yes.
So that was a less successful endeavor for us
in the early 2000s. Those 2000s carrier pigeons.
Yeah, as Undead, we have been experimenting with the podcast as format for a very long time now, and thankfully, it's finally taken off with a broader audience.
Listen. Before we get into it, I must say up front that I hate horror movies. I don't know if I've ever said that to you before, but I just hate being scared. I just find it incredibly annoying. And if I'm forced to watch a horror movie for whatever reason, you'll see me with my hands over my ears because I hate the jump scares. And it's so the fact that you've only been around, voice training for a year and a half, I think that's somehow poetic justice that I've been hating horror movies for most of my life.
Yeah, I gotta say, Scott, you know what? I am kind of in the same boat as you. I don't necessarily hate horror movies, but I, for most of my life, have avoided that genre. And what I like to say about it is, I have three things that make horror movies very bad for me, and those three things are: I have more or less a photographic memory, I have an overactive imagination, and I have a healthy fear of the dark.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
They
that's
just
a combo.
Stay on me and they stay in my mind. I mean, a lot of this is like leftover trauma from childhood, and it has been titrated out by adult experience a little bit. I'm more able to let go of them now. And I have seen some spooky movies. I had a roommate who wanted me to watch Hereditary, for instance, because he was like, this is an important film from a cinematic perspective. You have to see this. And we watched it, and I did really enjoy it. And it didn't, ruin the next 2 months of my life. But I've come a long way since I was a child.
Yeah. Ditto. That entire list, I can completely relate to. Like, I mean, watching the Blair Witch Project.
Oh man!
And I watched it. I was alone in the house for a few days.
I watched it in theaters.
I could not fall asleep. There was always this little small person in the corner of the room.
Yeah.
And every time I closed my eyes, it's just terrible.
What's your relationship to that, Roz? What do you do? How do you deal with folks who, have this particular handicap that Scott and I seem to share?
I mean, I guess I have a two-pronged response, and that's the first one is like, a lot of people don't like horror movies, Just the same way a lot of people don't like action or whatever, right? Like, it just doesn't appeal. That comes and goes.
Yeah.
It's just I'm a subgenre art critic, I guess. Like I look at the gothic, I look at the horrific, and there are plenty of people who line up for that. And then there are also tons of people who are like, I'm really into landscape paintings. Horror isn't my scene or whatever. But then what I say is that, horror and the gothic kind of suffuse culture.
Ooh.
Right? Like this is something that is like to the human condition. We have always been captivated by our fears. And as much as we're afraid of the dark, we kind of culturally are unable to look away from it.
Sure.
And to look away from what scares us. And so like when we do horror movie reviews, like our bread and butter, it's Evil Dead, it's Jason Voorhees, it's everybody you know and love, it's The Exorcist. But we also talk about, movies that engage with the horrific, engage with the gothic. We do a lot of documentaries.
Oh.
We talk about movies that are like, horror comedy stuff like Gremlins. Like I doubt Gremlins left many people up with nightmares on ending, right? So the horror and the gothic that we find in cinema is often much broader than the like blockbuster shelf labeling approach to genre gets us. And so I think that, makes our show a little bit weirder.
Sure. I also there's an interesting parallel, I think, to Scott's work, to our work, the MVM work, which is we talk a lot about this state of suspense, right? And we had our previous episode where Scott was telling us about spy movies, and I think that one of the things I understand about the horror genre is because it's sort of fundamentally so not real. Like all movies are not real, obviously, but like in horror, you're presented with a challenge, which is making something that is extra unreal feel very real. And so it feels like it's a genre of film where people have been able to experiment and advance the medium, because what they're trying to do is simulate a certain kind of reality, but also generate this really powerful sense of suspense. And how do you do that? Which I think we're interested in.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on, right? Horror as a genre wants to do something to your body, right? Like it is deeply physical. It is kind of one of the three sisters with the erotic and comedy. That this is a genre that first and foremost wants to elicit an uncontrolled, spontaneous reaction that just rips through the flesh.
Yeah.
You know, like when you get scared, you don't think through it. You just scream.
Right.
The same way that when someone tells a funny joke, you don't, I mean, if it's a good joke, you don't have to sit on it for a second before you laugh. The laugh just comes out of you. Yeah. The same way if it's a good horror movie, right? Like the fear is just going to be there in your body. You're going to feel tension in your muscles. You're going to start to sweat.
Yeah.
And I think that relationship to suspense and the kind of voice work from Miller Voice Method, right? That I'm now like a student of, I'm now a part of. I think that relationship is really interesting to explore.
And you could say the same thing for eroticism, right? Everything you've just said.
Oh, totally.
As far as suspense as well. Yeah.
What brought you into the podcasting world? Why this medium?
So I am an academic by training.
Yes, you've told me about some of your
did grad
degrees.
school, had a great time during that. And unfortunately, for my social well-being and character, I caught the bug, and now I'm inescapably academic. And I needed a way to continue doing that outside of academia. And the podcast kind of became a vessel for that. Not to say that we're an academic show, but a lot of the, theories we work with, a lot of the way we approach the horrific and the gothic stems from the fact that my co-ghost and I both went to grad school for Gothic studies,
Is
and
that
then
where you met?
Our love of podcasting. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Met in jolly old England, on a street side in Manchester. So a very cinematic origin story.
Yes. In the rain.
It was actually, ironically, it was an incredibly sunny day, and I remember just being uncomfortably warm in the UK. It was like one of the 2 days I've ever experienced that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's a sort of like a read and analysis quality that feels academic about doing reviews. And so you've been able to sort of protract that experience.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's always interesting thinking about kind of the way that we approach horror cinema as review, because I think a lot of reviews of movies kind of just boil down to how many stars you're going to give the movie, or what out of 10 does it receive? Like, what are you going to give it, a passing grade or a failing grade?
Right.
And I kind of think that a core tenet of my approach to art is that you have to look art in the eye. You can't look down on a piece of art. And likewise, if you're a critic, looking up to a piece of art can also lead you astray in terms of your analysis. And so kind of like, it doesn't matter how bad the horror movie is. It doesn't matter how much I personally disliked it or found it boring or ineffective. I've had so many exciting and interesting conversations about movies shot on a VHS tape for $35 total budget by a guy in Pennsylvania, as well as like a movie that premiered at the Cannes Film Festival that I thought was like utterly forgettable garbage, but still had an amazing conversation about it.
How do you know? How do you know if you're looking something in the eye?
I think for me that is about having a kind of like honest relationship to how the art is affecting me. and how I'm receiving it. And by treating these pieces of art, horror cinema, which is kind of traditionally like, there is a robust popular and academic tradition that looks at horror movie as something serious, a serious way to approach culture, but it is like still a bit dismissible, right? It's still a bit, bottom shelf, right? Like we still hide the horror a bit in culture. And I think by approaching these genres not only as things that are in and of themselves serious, but things that can create meaningful, serious change in people's lives, alongside like, oh, is this scare effective? And like, how do I feel about the special effects monster?
There's so often social commentary built into horror movies.
Oh yeah. I mean, I would argue that is even inescapable to what horror is conceptually.
Yeah.
If something is scaring me, it's necessarily somehow related to something other. It's somehow on the outskirts of society. And if it's as simple as a shadowy monster moving in the dark that we never really see, I mean, that's going to map on to people who are talked about as shadowy monsters that we never really see.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I think go ahead. I was just going to say, I think I'm developing a whole new respect for horror.
It begins.
Maybe I can.
Oh, this is good. I've got recommendations if you're interested.
Yes, I'm sure you do. Do you have a shelf of movies that you recommend to folks like us who don't like horror but have a non-zero amount of curiosity?
I always think recommending art is so fun because it's such a personal exchange.
Yes.
Because it's like here's something that meant something to me, and I want you to have a similar experience. I want to share it with you.
Right.
So I think that you can't recommend without sharing part of yourself. A movie that I always go to that I recommend for people is a kind of weird indie horror movie called WNUF Halloween Special.
Okay.
It is a movie that is packaged as a VHS recording of a local access TV's Halloween special from like the early 90s.
Okay.
And it's replete with fast forwarding and commercials.
Oh wow.
And the central story is about a news reporter going to a house that's going to have a spooky seance, the haunted house in the neighborhood.
What could go wrong?
And then what could go wrong? And then we've got the commercials intercut with it, and they're like, especially if you were alive in the 90s, it's such a playful exploration of what is now kind of a lost a format in media, the local access TV environment. And like that, all media is physical, right? Even if you're streaming something, you're streaming it off of a hard drive in a server somewhere, right? We can't escape that. And it's interesting to see the kind of history of that physicality in part become an aesthetic, right? And in part become a piece of the language of communication through cinema.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine younger viewers watching that film, with the fast forwards and sort of not necessarily understanding what they're looking at. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I guess right. On streaming can fast forward now, but it does more like a digital jump thing than that quality of watching the whole thing, but just sped up.
Mm-hmm. That and like I don't want to turn this into an hour of me plugging movies that I've given rave reviews to, as it were. But there is a movie that came out a few years ago called Off Ramp. It's got a lot of horror elements in it, but I wouldn't, put the horror sticker on it if we were at Blockbuster. Mm-hmm. And it is the story of two juggalos heading to the gathering of the juggalos. Okay. It is part a road trip movie, part coming of age. It's still in the top 5 movies I have ever seen.
Are juggalos?
It is a
sort of dangerous clown people. Is that what that is?
That is the term for people who are fans of the band The Insane Clown Posse and their kind of extended family of circus-themed horrorcore rap.
Yes. Okay.
So they're I guess a very clumsy analogy, and please forgive me, juggalos in the audience, but they're deadheads for The Insane Clown Posse. If you want a really rough outline sketch of how we could look at this.
Yes.
But the movie Off Ramp. Beautiful, It's one of the few movies that I've had to pause multiple times because I just couldn't stop crying.
Oh, wow.
It is so powerful.
A road trip about
And-
juggalos, and it's making you cry
Yeah.
left, right, and center. Fascinating.
And this is it goes back to the whole like, it would be so easy. It's so easy to dismiss a road trip about juggalos as something funny or unimportant. That's so outsider culture. That's so alien,
Niche.
right?
Very niche.
But and again, like I'm going to tie this into like a Miller voice method thing. But one of the most impactful things that early on, right, like that I learned was like the active listening. Keeping my active breath going while I'm listening to someone and truly trying to be present with the thing that I'm engaging with.
Uh-huh.
Like I was kind of spontaneously doing that with Off Ramp, and it just kind of like, a legendary filmmaker Tarkovsky was once asked like, what makes good art? And his response was a good piece of art plows through and harrows the soul, renders one capable of turning to good, and prepares one for death. And Off Ramp did all three for me.
Wow. I can't wait to listen to this back and write that down, because that sounds really intriguing. I think I very much agree with that. Well, there we go. We've got a good recommendation for us, Scott. Can we find this movie? Is this like an obscure one that we're gonna have to go digging for?
WNUF Halloween Special is slightly more obscure.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
It's certainly not like you can get the DVD copies of it on eBay if
I don't have anything to play
publisher isn't
DVD
selling them anymore. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, does anyone play DVDs? I know Off Ramp is still streaming. It's still available on streaming services.
Okay.
WNUF Halloween Special might be available on streaming services. I have a VHS copy of it, so I went old school for the old school throwback film.
Classic.
Hey Roz, what can you say the name of that movie again? What is it?
WNUF Halloween Special.
I'm assuming that's the call letters of the TV station in the film.
Okay, got it.
Nice.
And the other one is Off Ramp. Those are the two movies that I kind of go to like, I don't know, interesting, exciting horror movies that do something a little bit more than like, I got nothing against a film that's just a montage of a spooky zombie nun with jump scares. I almost said nun scares, which I guess that's a subgenre of horror.
Nun scares.
Yeah, I got nothing against that. It's fun. It's fun to get a bucket of popcorn and just make yourself jittery sometimes. Mm-hmm. But like, the movies that stay in the heart, the stuff that really sticks to the ribs. That's what I go to for recommendations.
I feel like we should watch some horror performances and analyze them for their breathing, because I think as an actor, I think about horror. Each genre might present certain challenges, and there are some people who are just really, really good at acting in horror films. You have to buy in so hard to be believable again in this world that is so intentionally and to a certain extent visibly fake. You know what I mean? Like crying in a drama, being believable as someone's like jilted lover or child is completely different than being so completely transported as someone who's being chased by a zombie, which is just a person in makeup. Like, I feel like it has its own challenges for actors, for performers. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
I always find it interesting because I think that the thing that's coming to me in this moment is there's almost different valences of breath and acting in a horror context, right? So like legendary scream queen Linnea Quigley, who was in so many just like sorority babes at the Slime Bowl Bolorama.
Okay.
Just in all of these kind of like, like grungy, somewhat underground horror films. She's got this like interesting anecdote where she's filming a horror movie and her character is like impaled on a wall I think it was on antlers.
Okay.
Of like a hunting trophy.
Yeah.
Covered in blood, mostly naked. Right.
Classic.
But in reality, we've got like a working actor who's wearing like a suspension harness, stuck to a wall in a freezing cold movie set, like all movie sets have to be unless they're uncomfortably hot for some reason.
Sure.
You know, God forbid a movie set has a comfortable temperature. So she's freezing cold, mostly naked, in pain, hanging from this thing, covered in fake blood. And she has to scream for hours and hours on end while they get the shot right. And I think about like the breath in that moment, trying to find this, like, how do you sustain a lack of tension over time? How do you sustain terror and fear and pain through a breath that needs to be easeful for you, the actor, who needs to keep doing this all day, every day?
Yeah.
But for a character that needs to be in the exact opposite headspace, for a character who's in like maximized distress, I guess.
Yeah, we were
tension.
talking.
I mean, all of those things, fuel tension for sure.
Roz, you and I were talking the other day about Vincent Price, and the challenge of, I think there's a two-part challenge. One is most of the stuff is out of sequence, right? So like on command, you have to re-embody the circumstances, the situation, not only that's happening in the moment, but that has led up to the thing happening in the moment.
Yeah.
Right. And then the physical aspect of the health that you're speaking about. And then the third thing is, quite often you're looking at nothing, right? We're seeing a shot of you seeing something that actually is not actually in front of you for the actor. So the active imagination, the visual imagination, sensorial imagination, has to be pretty advanced to get a level of believability for their own nervous system, for us to then believe what they're seeing, even though they're not actually seeing it a lot of times.
Yeah, I wonder what they do for that. Like, it's not like playing a 2-shot in a drama where you would actually have the other person or even a stand-in that you could look at. Like I'm finding in my process as an actor that my instrument has shifted enough that at this point, if I just have a person to look at in the eyes, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I feel like I can kind of do just about anything. I can kind of get just about anywhere. if I just have a person, if I have my breath, like that has been a massive unlock for me. But if I have my breath and I have a human being whose eyes I can look into, I can go pretty far in that sort of instantaneous moment. But yeah, you're right. Like, these people don't have necessarily any of that to look at or take in.
Yeah, I think of Harrison Ford. I mean, Harrison Ford has made a career out of looking at nothing, and reacting to it as if he's seeing the same thing that we are going to be seeing on camera. And it's an art form, the ability to do that. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I think I actually have a question for the two of you, if you don't mind a table turning.
Please.
Briefly here, and so you're both actors,
Cool.
and have acting backgrounds. And so my question is, like, have either of you had to enact fear as a character you were playing, and what was that experience like? Especially in terms of, like, I'm really interested in, like, like maintaining easeful breath and kind of like doing the Miller voice method thing in those moments that are kind of, I guess in a way, I don't want to go as far as to say contradictory to what MVM teaches, but in a way that, like, I think really adds a lot of duress.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the way that I'm hesitating here because this kind of intertwines with the creation and the development of all the stuff that we do at Miller Voice Method. But, on set, a typical scenario on set, you are involved in some kind of emotionally extreme event. And it doesn't have to be horror. It could be an emotionally extreme. What I mean by that is simply a higher vibration, right? That your character is experiencing a higher vibration of energy, so much so that it's readable, right, and consistent with the circumstance. So there's that going on, and then we say cut, and then there's a technical problem, and or the camera has to move, or we're setting up the next shot, or right, all that stuff. But the next shot is going to be a close up instead of a medium. So it's the same exact circumstance, and that could take a half an hour. So what I started to understand that is the only way to keep that kind of percolating, much like a fire that needs oxygen to sustain itself, right, is to keep some low level of active breath going. That coupled with really being a custodian of my attention. What am I paying attention to? Am I allowing my attention to start to wander into things that have nothing to do with the situation at hand, that are going to kind of interrupt my nervous system from staying in some neighborhood of the circumstance where when we're getting close to, shooting again, that I can start to reinvigorate that breath at a higher level just meaning maybe a deeper breath, maybe a more rapid breath, but I can play with those levers, right? To start to, because all those things are very much akin to what the nervous system provokes in us when we're getting present information, outside data. We're being stimulated by either internal or external data. So it's not divorced from, and a lot of this is in the text transfusion book, plug, right? It's like that stuff's not divorced. Like what you're remembering and what you're quote unquote memorizing is everything. So everything is memory, we know now, right? So it's not like I can say words and my nervous system is not consistent with what the words that I'm saying, and suddenly I can kind of piece those two things together as separate memories. It doesn't really work that way. So staying focused in and involved on some level with the task at hand really helps a lot. Really can help a lot in these kinds of regards.
I'm curious if there's a little bit of a paradox there. You hear about actors, staying in character, whatever that means, staying in it, staying dropped in, whatever that means, right? And I feel like that's to some extent akin to what you're talking about. And you're talking about maintaining a certain level of active breath in order to stay present with present information. But in the scenario you're describing, the present information is cut, we're turning around back to ones, right? Like suddenly I'm not in the world of the thing anymore. I'm now in the world of the movie set. And so it's sort of fascinating to me that the argument is stay in active breath. I'm simplifying, obviously, but stay in active breath because that will allow you access to present information, even though present information is now not what you need, but it's still somehow going to keep you attuned to your own instrument, your own imagination, so that it's like less of a journey to get back to that place that you need to be in when they yell action again. Yeah, because I don't know. Is that a paradox?
I don't think so. I mean, it goes to kind of a definition of what focus is, right? I would say focus is the delineation, the ability to delineate between some pieces of present information versus other pieces of present information, right? Because there's an infinite amount of present information happening around you, consciously and unconsciously. So then it becomes your selector tool is called focus, right? Which pieces are you going to kind of frontally focus on, and which pieces are you not going to get hooked by, right? So are you going to get hooked by the grip and the lighting person having the conversation about the stance, right? That's present information. Or are you going to get hooked by your imagination of the circumstance that you're in, which we all do. When you walk down the street, right? If I'm thinking about something that just happened, or my imagination or concentration is hooked on the conversation I just had, that's the present information I am now involved in, with cars whizzing by me, with people walking by me. That's present information too, but I don't even see them, right? Yeah. They're not influencing my imagination. They're not influencing my nervous system. until I let that happen, right? Until I let them in the sense of focus. So it's at the end of the day, you know, and again, this is why I think older actors tend to be more effective actors, because they have learned, actors, humans, right, have learned to pay attention to certain things and not pay attention to other things at a very high level, right? Where when I was younger, that was much harder to do. Like everything affected me. I took everything, and I was influenced by everything. And my nervous system was all over the place. I was being hooked and pushed about by a lot of that, not knowing that I had the power to kind of focus where I wanted to, or the experience perhaps is a better way of saying it, to do that. So that's why I think acting is a craft, just like carpentry or architecture or anything anybody does repetitively really well. We don't have to get highfalutin about it. It could be, it could be anything, any job you have in your life. The more you do it, the more focus of attention you get to have on the task at hand. And then the more unconscious it becomes, then the less kind of focus of attention that you need to have on it.
Right, exactly.
To be able to do that.
You can re-engage more swiftly.
Yeah, and that's right. That's like an ebb and flow thing over time of experience. So there's no kind of like when you get this age or this level of experience, now you can listen to the grip talking about that, where now you can kind of drop out and drop back in 10 seconds or 15 seconds. That's going to be up to the individual and their abilities to do that. And so it's just about really knowing your instrument and what works for you in that regard.
I think that's part of what we teach in MVM too, is the ability to come back. We teach people, I teach in the CERT program, I'm teaching teachers who are in training. And so often what we sort of catch them doing, and actors do this too, to a certain extent, is checking out of the moment, going into what we call the back office. So now I'm thinking about what I just said or what I have to say later, or, I'm sort of running that internal critic. And because of that, I've left the moment. And so we posit that the active breath can be a very effective tool for bringing you back to this present information. So it's not necessarily about making you an actor or a teacher who is constantly out in front doing, sort of achieving the thing you're trying to do, but developing the sensor for, I have left the moment. How do I swiftly, efficiently, and easefully get back into the moment?
Yeah,
right?
and I would dig even more granularly, because that old 20th century phrase, and you've heard the retort 1,000 times from teachers. I probably said it myself. You're not in the moment. Be in the moment. So this kind of in the moment thing, or you're in your head. These phrases, which I would say do very little besides shame the actor. And at their kind of base level, they're not true. You're always in the moment, right? But the question is, which moment are you in? Are you in the moment of being in your back office, thinking about what just happened before, being self-conscious about it? Or are you in the moment of coming back out into the room and dealing with the information in the room? But both actions are being in the moment, right? And by the way, everything happens in your head anyway, right?
I was going to say,
everything is coming from your brain.
Exactly.
So both of those, I think, both of those phrases are not so helpful, because for my part, they're just too general, and on some level, they're not actually accurate to what is the issue of the thing that's going on and what's being attempted to address.
To get back, Roz, to your question and answer it from my perspective, I haven't really had to play a lot of tremendous fear. I would say the closest thing to that, the sort of scaredest I had to be was there's a show that I toured for several years in my mid-20s. It was called Cranked, and I describe it as a one-man hip-hop musical about crystal meth addiction for high school students. I didn't write it, but I did originate the role, and I played this
Interesting.
Kyle,
Yeah,
is it the high school students that are on meth, or you're playing it for the high school students?
It was theater for young audiences, so it was for high school students, and it's an after school special on stage. It's a cautionary tale. It's it's part of the broader theater for young audiences umbrella, which tends to be plays with a message about whatever it might be, acceptance, gender, say no to drugs, whatever the case may be. And this was very specifically about a 17-year-old kid. I played a 17-year-old kid who was struggling with meth addiction. And I played, the counselor and the father and the high school teacher and the whatever. Like I played probably 7 or 8 different characters. But it was a really gritty, dark show, and I had to go through several episodes as part of the performance, episodes of addiction, of withdrawal, of like fleeing the cops, but then like finding out later that it was all a hallucination. So I definitely was playing a lot of fear and pain and like all the twitching and all that kind of stuff. And this was in my early 20s. I didn't go to acting school until I went to grad school in my 30s at NYU, where I met Scott. I had done some training here and there, but I hadn't really done sort of proper voice training. And I say that in air quotes. I don't know what that means, proper voice training, but I hadn't done sort of concerted voice training. And I hurt myself. I had one doctor who was a non-voice specialist, ENT, tell me that I had nodes, which of course scared the living crap out of me. And then I went to a voice specialist, ENT, and she looked me very sweetly in the eyes and she held my hand and she said, "I'm so sorry that other doctor said that thing to you." Because ENTs who don't specialize in voice with actors, they don't necessarily know that the word nodes it feels like a death sentence. I mean, it's not. But when you're an actor, when you hear that word, you think, "Oh, well, that's it. I'm screwed. I'm hooped. That's it for me." And so she worked with me and, she said, "You have some inflammation, you have some swelling, whatever it is." And for what it's worth, I've had several other people scope me and I've had still more breadth of diagnosis. I had someone else say that I had a lesion. I had someone else say that like my vocal cords are so powerful, you could tell just by looking at them that there's no way I could ever get nodes. And I'm like, okay, guys, what is it? Wow. I have no idea. But needless to say, I was working from a lot of tension at that time because I didn't really know anything about ease, about vocal channel. I worked with a speech language pathologist after that, and she basically taught me what my mask was. She taught me about sort of ping and ring and finding that front resonant, masky, bright sound, which can allow you to achieve volume, brightness, distance in your sound without just thinking about volume. And so like that was all totally new to me. But she taught me just a few things, and then I went back out on the road and did another, 100 performances or something, and it was completely, it wasn't flawless by that point, but it was completely changed. I didn't hurt myself further, which I think is kind of amazing. That just that little bit of attention on technique was able to help sustain me through a much longer period of shows.
Kyle, I think this might be much to my embarrassment as someone who's become, I guess, like kind of a career film critic, but I am walking away from what you just said with a kind of somewhat profound appreciation for the actors who play roles in like those after school PSA specials that always come off as so hokey and strange, but I had never really sat with the fact that like, oh my God, yeah, the guy who's playing the teen struggling with addiction in this kind of like dare PSA might really be putting his heart and soul into what he's doing right now, even if the final packaging is kind of goofy.
To be fair, this show, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, again, I didn't write it, I didn't produce it. This show landed with people. There was something about this show, and it could be worth an exploration at some point of exactly why this show didn't didn't reek of After School Special in quite the same way. Like, there's no denying that that's what it was, but there was some alchemical combination of the writing, my performance, the quality of the music that was in it, and Patrick McDonald, my director. He had a really wonderful sense for tone and rhythm. And it's interesting. I'm picturing him now, and he would often run rehearsals standing at the door to the rehearsal space, not looking at me, which might sound sort of, abusive in that like classic theater maker kind of way, but it wasn't in any kind of way like a head game. He was listening for, again, a lot of the stuff that we listen for in MVM: pitch, tempo, point of view, musicality. He was using his ear to listen for, that feels whatever, fake. That feels, it's fascinating that theater is such a visual medium, but we are so attuned through our ears to what feels natural and honest and authentic, that's a lot of how he would direct it. He did an incredible job. But it was quite a journey.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of the one-person aspect of the show, because there's something about one-person shows when they're done really well. And I know you're acting, Kyle, and I know you're an amazing actor, so I know it probably was done very well. So when it's done really well, I think there's an empathic quality that is that's bonus material versus like an 8-person cast, where you start to understand, we are actually all the same. And when you see that embodied in one person, so many different points of view and so many different, circumstances and angles, I think it really drives that, that how the similarities that we have versus the differences.
Sure.
That message.
If you can contain all of this, then I could contain all of this.
Yeah. And then if I can, then I think there's an inherent empathic quality that can start to percolate in the audience. Which I would argue has to happen if we're really going to be impacted by what we're viewing and experiencing as the viewer.
I really love one-person stage performances because I completely agree. There's I guess I would say an intimacy with that. There's something really disarming when you're watching one person, especially if they have multiple roles to play, just kind of navigate everything on their own and have like no co-conspirators on that stage. Of course, because there's always a second person in every stage performance. There's always the audience. Yeah. Right. You always have them to act off of and act with. Right.
Yeah.
But there's like the most memorable stage performances I've seen have been just these one-person shows that are just so, there's something captivating about it. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's the kind of theater that brought me to theater. There's a Canadian theater artist named Daniel McIver, and he was making these solo shows in, I want to say, the 80s into 90s, and discovering that and just being like, oh, this is what this can be. Oh, I'm in. Like, I'm hooked. And for me, it's like the solo-ness and the virtuosity of it, I do always really appreciate. But for me, the thread you're talking about between the actor and the audience, for me, that is always what I'm interested as an actor. Even when I'm in, I did The Hills of California with 13 people on stage. And like that, for me, that silver thread between me and the audience, that is the only thing that I care about. And it's not, and that's not a given. There are so many actors who don't want to think about the audience. They don't want to see who's there. They don't want to know. They don't want to see them. They don't even they want to pretend that they're not even there. And that is so fascinating and so foreign to me, because that is what I'm here for, is that feeling, that connection, that play.
I feel the same way about podcasting, right? Like, and for this too, it's so much more disembodied. How haunting of me.
Yeah.
Right. It's so much more, alien in a way, right? Ghostly, spectral even apparitional, dare I.
Ooh.
But there's still that relationship.
How do you feel it? How do you feel that connection?
I always feel that connection on the back end, right? Because I think the difference for me is that I've done some live shows for podcasting, and then you do have the audience in front of you.
Yeah.
But the audience reception for this always kind of comes later. Like podcasting in a way is like, we started this off as a joke on our show that podcasting is a visual media. When we did a 26-hour long episode reviewing, I think, about 80 Amityville horror movies. And there's like, I think 94 total Amityville horror movies. So some we couldn't find even. And we joked that movie was now the longest, or that episode is now the longest Amityville horror movie.
Yes.
And it counts as a movie, even though it's audio only. But the more that I've kind of like, it's sat with that joke, the more I'm like, oh, this is there's such a visual element to this. There's such a kinship with cinema in a weird way that, like, maybe this is because it ties back to radio theater. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because there's a kinship to that, and I am a radio theater girly. I love old radio serials. Mm-hmm. But you get your connection to the audience always after the fact. You talk with your host later, or like you get a comment on the episode, and you learn, like, oh my god, that was the thing that registered. Like I'll occasionally get messages, and people will be like, yeah, you had a 2-line joke in a review of a Jason Voorhees film that changed the direction of part of my life. And I will just be like, I don't know how to process what you're telling me right now, but I am humbled by it.
Yeah.
I wonder how much this, the fascination or the kind of focus of attention for the audience, and even suspense for the audience, has to do with the one person aspect to it. Because whenever there's kind of a one person aspect, like that person could go off the rails at any moment, right? Whether it's, and I'm thinking of stand-up comedy, right? That is incredibly suspenseful. Singing, one person singing is incredibly suspenseful.
Oh yeah.
And we're not, with theater, we're just not used to seeing just one person. So inherently it is less suspenseful than when we see just one person doing all these different roles. I think it captures that. But I think even with film, most of the time the shots are of one person. So it feels like it's just that person and me, the viewer, alone, and at any moment that person could go off the rails as well. So I wonder about that kind of one person aspect to it.
It's funny, Scott. I find that the opposite in film is very, very captivating for me, and maybe this is because I'm a theater person. I will never forget watching Secrets and Lies by Mike Leigh, and there's a scene in the film where the two women are they meet for the first time. The woman and her daughter, they meet for the first time, and it's a 2-shot in this diner or this cafe. And I don't know how long it is, but it's long. It's a long scene. And I watched that movie when I was quite young, and I think I was used to watching film and TV where, like what you're saying, mostly on screen, it's only one person at a time by and large. But there was something about the fact that I was now watching a theater scene where it feels like so much more can go wrong. So much more could go off the rails because A, there's two people, and B, it's just a really long shot. So I think it feels like a sort of an opposite thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's something interesting about, because a stage performance, to a certain degree how your audience will react. We can make reasonable assumptions based on like our agreed social conditions.
Yeah.
If it goes well, they're gonna cry when they should cry. They're gonna laugh when the comedy beats hit, and they're gonna stand up and applaud at the end. And otherwise, they're gonna hopefully mostly be quiet and enjoy the performance, however they're enjoying it. But with recorded media, whether you're a musician putting out your first cassette tape, or a filmmaker or a podcaster, you kind of hand this thing off to an unknown audience member, and then they like do with it what they will.
Yeah.
And like there's a voyeurism to this. There's a libidinal energy to what goes on here. Because I know with my own show, like, there was a DSA chapter that was using the show as like a reading group thing, as like a book club of sorts, where they would listen to an episode and then discuss it. I don't know if that's still going on. That was a few years back now. But that happened and I would, sure, great. That's cool. I didn't guess that was something that would happen when I started my show.
Yeah.
And I think that happens too with like, it's part of like the art is Frankensteinian in its nature. We give birth to these creations, whether it's a podcast or your performance, and like even with a stage play, where that the audience is hopefully no one's going to stand up and start booing you, or something extreme like that.
Hopefully. But
what we don't know is when the art's no longer ours when it hits the audience, then it becomes theirs. Then it belongs to culture. And how they receive that and what they do with it and how that is transformed is something that I think is like, I don't know. This is so hokey. There's something magical about that, right?
Mm-hmm. No, it is magic. It's the closest we get. Art is the closest. Well, not the closest, but it's a way that we experience magic. It's the way that we experience the transcendent, the impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's hokey. I think that's true.
Especially for the three of us who are predisposed to be like, no, that's totally true.
Yeah, we're hooked.
So Roz, can you give us, if anyone's listening and thinking about podcasting or just starting out podcasting, like Kyle and I are novice podcasters, what are some, I don't know, some tips and tricks or some things to think about in podcasting?
Yeah, make us better.
Oh God, where would I even start? I am an accidental professional podcaster. I didn't like walk into this with like marketing expertise or a competency with audio production or anything. Like I've learned all of these skills DIY kind of as I've collided with podcasting. But what I would say is that like, so most podcasts don't have listeners. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, there is an infinite slurry of podcasts out there on every topic you could ever imagine. And there's also something freeing in that. Mm-hmm. There are tons of horror movie podcasts. There are ones that are way more popular than mine will ever get. But, just do it anyway. Do your thing. Make it unique, right? Try and break out as best you can. And then like one of the best pieces of advice I ever got when it comes to creating something like this was make 10. Do 10 episodes of your show. Or if you want to start writing poetry, write 10 poems.
Interesting.
Just do it. It doesn't have to be in one sitting, and you can, write a poem and then be like, what do I like about this poem I wrote? I'm going to go read a book on poetry and write my second one. But by the 10th one, you will have such an intimate knowledge of what it is you want and what it is you're doing, and the direction you want to go and how you want to approach this thing that you're trying to create in the world. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the highfalutin answer, and then the basic answer is like, podcasting is, you don't need a stage, you don't even need the audience, to a certain degree, you just need yourself and maybe some other people who want to talk about something interesting with you, and you sit down and you talk about it, and like one of my favorite podcasts is called Library Punk. And it's people with library science backgrounds or who are in the like greater library ecosystem, and they just talk shop and interesting issues in library sciences and libraries in general. I go to libraries, but I don't have like a library background. Mm-hmm. I'm a longtime listener, never caller, I guess, when it comes to libraries, and I'm captivated by it. And here's something that I'm like, I never would have thought that I would have been captivated by the inner workings, the mechanism of the library. But yeah, I don't know, just go for it. Yeah, that's the advice.
What do you think captivates you about that particular show?
I think it's the people who run it. Uh-huh. Yeah, I think it's the cast and crew. Uh-huh. To use some acting parlance, it's the people and it's their perspectives and it's their character. Mm-hmm. Right, that comes forward. It's not just the subject matter, but it's who's bringing the subject matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a couple of voices, dare I say.
I listen to all that.
Disembodied,
I listen to all
if you
that,
will.
and I think about authenticity and what authenticity is, and how authenticity is all the rage now. And of course, with anything that's all the rage, there's an attempt to can it and to figure out the algorithm of authenticity, and then to market it and blah blah blah. But the reality, at least the way I see it, and I understand authenticity, is it is yours. Like there is no other, right? It is unique and it is individual, and it cannot be canned by definition, right? The minute I try to do your version of authenticity, it is no longer authentic. So it really resonates to me when you say the characters and the personalities and who they are, because there is something very freeing and empathic, I think, about hearing or seeing or experiencing or being in a relationship with another person who is, moment to moment, in the sense of expressing themselves outwardly, moment to moment. That is incredibly powerful.
And I think the discussion of authenticity is one that I find to be really interesting, because I think that we're almost overly focused on authenticity as an individualized phenomenon. Like, how can I, as an island in a sea disconnected from all others, discover a kind of like this novum of uniqueness, right? That is mine and mine alone. When I think that some of the most engaging moments that I would receive as authentic happen as connections between people. Like our authenticity is forged as a phenomenon that lives between us. Like that authenticity needs to be received. It needs to collide with someone. And whether that's the co-host of your podcast, your audience, the people in the stage, or the people on stage with you, or maybe in the audience of the stage, like that's where the authenticity is kind of born in a way.
Yeah, I love that.
That's a beautiful place to maybe put a pin in it for today. We will hear from Roz again, teasing a future episode. We're going to have Roz and JP back to talk about some fascinating stuff. But in the interim, Roz, is there anything that you would like to plug? Anything you want to publicize before we sign off for today?
Oh my God. So the Horror Vanguard listeners, that's my podcast, by the way. It's called Horror Vanguard. My listeners who've come here will no doubt at this point be going, Rosalynde, you have not plugged your own show yet. you might not have even said the name of your show up until this point, which is par for the course, that I would plug another show before getting to mine.
Yes.
But yeah, my podcast is Horror Vanguard. You can find us wherever podcasts are distributed. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus after our 26-hour episode, but we've got a little interlude, a mini-series coming out that actually, by the time this is out, oh my God, I'm producer of both of these shows. I can do this. By the time this is out, that will already have been out. So I'm coming to you from the future of the past, dear listeners.
The future of the past. Gorgeous.
Yeah, thank the two of you so much for having me on this show. I'm so excited that we get to do this together. I find, if I could just be overly earnest, I find your conversations on breath and acting and voice work to be really captivating. This is interesting stuff for me as someone who's, I'm halfway through my Miller Voice Method teacher certificate, and having a great time doing it and learning so much about not only my voice and what I want to do with that, but also discovering new things about myself. Like new directions I might want to take, things I might want to learn and pursue. So I don't know. It's just a fantastic opportunity to get to share this space with the two of you.
Well, as attributions go, sometimes they're very, romantic and perhaps very sentimental. But I have to say, factually speaking, but for Roz, this adventure into podcasting does not happen. We had ideas about podcasting for years and years and years. And then Roz came along into the program, and we have a work study. We have a lot of work study students as a way of financing the program. And Roz was one of them. And with all work study students, we try to source their greatness in what they do and see if we can apply it and engage with it in some way within the company. And Roz came with all this experience in podcasting. I was like, oh my God, it's time. The time has come.
Yep.
And it is. And really, but for Roz, this, none of this happened. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
That. Yeah.
Oh, you're quite welcome. And I guess while we're here, shout out to Allie from MVM, without whom nothing would ever happen.
That's true.
So,
Allie's our general manager.
Thank you, Allie.
Yes. I think we'll have Allie on one time, actually, because
we should.
We do
totally
want to get into politics a little bit and coaching. I've had a fair bit of experience working with and coaching politicians, so that will be on a future podcast.
You can always find out information about what we're up to at millervoicemethod.com. When this comes out, we will be gearing up for a summer level 1 of our teacher certification. Again, this is the more or less year-long program, which you can break up into pieces as you see fit and as you need to. But to become a Miller Voice Method teacher, again, you don't have to know anything about the technique in order to sign up. So go to our website, check that out. And we have a couple of acting offerings coming up. Scott, you want to talk a little bit about what's coming up in LA?
Yeah, I collaborate with another coach, and that'll be online as well. I'll be out in LA at some point in May. It's specifically an on-camera workshop where we collaborate on working on camera and how all this approach is impactful on camera as well, as opposed to theater. And then Kyle, you and I will be co-teaching a workshop in New York, right?
It looks like it. We don't have all the details just yet, but it looks like maybe we've just booked the space for the weekend of May 15th through the 17th. And that will be at the Atlantic Acting School in New York City. Looking at a sort of 2 full day plus a little evening to start off workshop. And we're calling it Essentials for Acting. And so it's designed for folks. We don't actually know exactly what the content is, but I think the idea is to have something for folks who either don't have any MVM experience or who have dabbled and who are professional actors looking to add that compelling secret sauce to their work. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Again, millervoicemethod.com. The information will be there. And I think that's all we need to cover for today. Anything I'm missing, Scott?
Not that I can think of.
All right. Roz, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, again, for creating this whole venture for us, facilitating the birth of this podcast into the world.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for having me on. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in.
As always. And we will see Roz again on a future episode of Active Breath. Thank you, my friends. All right. Anon. See you next time.